Hello, everyone. Welcome. As everyone's just getting in here, we will start in just a minute. We appreciate everyone coming and joining us for today's webinar. Great. We'll get started in just a second. Right. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We're excited to see your faces here. We're excited to have you for this excellent conversation that we're going to have. And I think we're ready to get started. Looks like everyone's in here. So hello, welcome to today's Alumni Career Lab webinar. My name is Lacey Niemeyer-John, and I am joined by Dean Axelrod, Marissa Carpenter from Eller MBA, and we are going to provide a great discussion and opportunity to hear from one of our well-accomplished alumnus. So thank you for joining us. And today's topic is going to be the career journey, finding opportunities and successes. And this webinar is part of a free Alumni Career Lab series offered by the Alumni Career Lab. And today we're partnering with Eller MBA programs to offer this amazing webinar. And both of our programs, we offer these monthly conversations with experts on a variety of industry and professional development topics to help you navigate and manage your careers and to be a resource for you as you look for that career success. So today's presentation is going to be recorded and it will be archived on the Alumni Association's website for you to access on demand in the future if you need it. You'll be able to find a link to this and more at arizonaalumni.com/careers. And if you haven't done so already, please go ahead and mute your microphone just to help with the sound. And we encourage you to ask questions during the event. So please utilize the chat feature on the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to your questions as we move through Dean's presentation. And we'll also have time at the end if you wanted to contribute to that discussion. So thanks again for joining us. And now it's time to introduce our speaker and guest, Dean Axelrod. And he is the Associate Director of Partnerships and Philanthropy at Direct Relief, which is a privately funded humanitarian aid organization with a mission to improve the health and lives of people affected by poverty or emergencies, and without regard to politics, religion, or ability to pay. So it's a great organization. We're excited to hear more about it. Dean earned his MBA and law degrees from the University of Arizona. So he is a proud Wildcat. We're happy to have him here. And he also has a bachelor's in English from Boston University. Dean is the immediate past president of the Rotary Club of Santa Barbara and serves on the club's board. Dean has already been active in and involved in the Santa Barbara community with partners in education, women economic ventures, the Santa Barbara Open Streets, Anti-Defamation League, the Santa Barbara Chamber of Orchestra, and also a coach for the Dos Pueblos High School mock trial team. So Dean is very busy, and we are really grateful for him to carve out time today to present to us about his career and to give us some advice for our own. So Dean, I'm going to turn the time over to you. Thank you for being part of this program.
Thank you very much, Lacey. I'm really happy to be here, and it feels good to be back on campus virtually. I haven't been back in a long time, and it's nice to be reconnecting with some fellow Wildcats. And you know, a lot has happened since 2001 in my career. There have been a lot of twists and turns, and I'm going to share with you not just kind of my experience since graduate school, but kind of some lessons learned over the years of my own career, but also from the conversations I've had with other people, other professionals who have come to me either directly or they've been referred to me. They found me on LinkedIn and kind of liked what they saw about my career path and what I'm doing, and seeing that here's somebody with a background in business, a lawyer, and he's working at this humanitarian organization, and it looks interesting. And what I'm finding is that more and more today, I think it's always been the case, but it feels like I'm seeing so much more of it now. People want to find meaning in their working lives. And, I talked to quite a few lawyers, business people who have had what you would think of as very successful careers, and they might have thought of it the same way. But they're looking for a change. They're looking to find meaning. Something is missing. And that something is a little bit different for everybody, but there are also some common threads. Years and years of grinding away, trying to reach maybe conventional milestones and measures of success that isn't working for them. Or entrepreneurs who've been very successful, made money, sold a business, and are looking for a second mountain to climb that has more meaning to them. And sometimes, where you are in your career and how successful you're being can be hard to recognize when you're in the middle of it. Kind of like what they say about, not being able to see the forest through the trees. But when you look back, things start to become clear. And the way one experience led to the next, when in the moment it might have seemed like everything was going wrong, turns out that if it hadn't been for those struggles, those challenges, those feelings of being lost and uncertain, those are exactly what were needed to get you to a point where things look really good. And so that's been my experience. And what I'll share with you also is that my experience, my way is not the only way. My journey is not the only or best journey. But I think the principles that I've discovered are universal, and the approach that I'm going to share with you and that we're going to talk about, I think will help you get on track or stay on track at any stage of your career. My work is in so many ways, it's almost I feel silly saying it like this because I never would have, but it really is a dream job for me. I know people in my organization at Direct Relief who look at my job and they wouldn't want it for anything in the world. But my job in this organization is the perfect fit for me. And what's beautiful about it, and the reason I want to share the story, is that I wasn't looking for it when I found it. I had been, and I'll share with you a little bit more about the various directions and stages of my career, the turns and the twists. But at the time, I had been working as a financial advisor. I'd moved out to Santa Barbara at the end of 2013 to work for Edward Jones as a financial advisor. I didn't have any experience as a financial advisor, but I was able to look at my past experience and look at what Edward Jones was looking for and find where they overlapped. My wife and I wanted to move to the coast. We decided to live in Santa Barbara. It was probably the most insane decision we'd ever made. If you've ever been here, you know that it's one of the most beautiful places you could choose to live, and it's a wonderful sense of community, but it's not an easy place to afford to live. And it's a relatively small community. In a lot of ways, it reminds me of Tucson, but with better weather and easier access to the beach. So I found this opportunity at Edward Jones that would give us a chance to come on out here, but I didn't know anybody. I didn't know what I was doing. Got trained as to sell securities and insurance and all of that. But after a few years, I realized that it was not the career I wanted. I was hoping that it would be sort of the last chapter and that we'd run out the clock in Santa Barbara as a financial advisor. And after a few years, I just could see that the lifestyle wasn't what I wanted. It just wasn't bringing me the fulfillment, although I enjoyed so much about it. So I went to look for what it was out there and found Direct Relief, and was kind of surprised by what I saw. Now, I was on the board of the Santa Barbara Chamber Orchestra, and one of my fellow board members, who she and I were both relatively new on the board, she worked at Direct Relief. She's now the chief operating officer. At the time, she was the director of IT. And I told her that I had seen a job posting and that I was looking for some opportunities, and would she tell me about Direct Relief? And what made me fall in love with this organization that is beloved globally for its supportive healthcare for people who don't otherwise have access to it. What got my attention was the business model, that the embrace of technology, the very hard-headed business kind of approach that didn't get in the way of an open-hearted approach to taking care of people and providing access to healthcare. Healthcare wasn't even on my radar, but sound business principles, coming out of the Eller program, I left that program thinking, why don't nonprofits function like this? And I had been on my soapbox in so many ways when I had a chance as a lawyer working with nonprofits and as a business consultant, trying to help organizations see that using sound business principles just because you're a charity isn't a bad thing. So when I found Direct Relief, this global organization that had grown, and I learned its history and I saw what it was doing, but more importantly, how it was doing it, I thought, that sounds pretty good for me. And I've only fallen in love with it more since I've been here and really connected and seen the impact of what we do. But what's also interesting is that what has made Direct Relief so successful among its donors and so beloved among its donors is that very business-like approach that has brought efficiency and effectiveness to what we do. So the job, when I found it, wasn't the goal. I didn't even know it existed. I stumbled onto it. And the job that I applied for wasn't the job I got. You know how it is today. You look for a job and you look at the job postings and you don't really know what it is and you have no idea what they pay, and you're really at a disadvantage, I think, as the job seeker in today's job market. And technology has only made it worse. But I saw what I wanted to see. I saw the description of the responsibilities. I saw what they were looking for, and I thought, my first job out of college was at a nonprofit, and ever since then I hadn't worked for one. And I didn't know anything about. Basically, it was a development type of job. I didn't really know about development, but I thought, how different could it be from really high quality sales? If you're a consultative salesperson, you're using best practices, and I had to imagine that in fundraising, those same principles would apply. So I could probably do that. I know how to, engage and meet with people and look for what their values are and what's important to them. That's what I did as a lawyer. It's what I did as a financial advisor. So I thought, why not give it a shot? And I started interviewing informally, sort of through some back channels, because I didn't want to make a big deal about the possibility of closing my office at Edward Jones. And so I was introduced to somebody else in the organization. We had an informal conversation. The more I heard, the more I was in love with the organization, and it seemed like a perfect fit. And I went through all the interviews. And the interesting thing is, what happened was they finally made me an offer, and they said, "But we want to offer you a job, but it's not the one you applied for. Would that be okay?" And by this point, I had come to understand the mindset and the approach, and I trusted them. And I said, if you think there's a better fit for me in the organization, I'm in no position to tell you you're wrong. So tell me what you have in mind, and let's see what it pays, and let's see how it works. And it turned out that all of the qualities that make Direct Relief such a good organization from a business standpoint were visible to me right then and there. They saw the value in me that I couldn't have anticipated. They didn't know they were looking for me. They weren't looking for me. It turns out they were looking for a lower level position, but they saw an opportunity. So that story helps me see how knowing where you are and how you're feeling about your experience in your career is really important to figuring out how to go forward and how to find new opportunities and how to find the success that you want. So starting with where you are in the process, I think, is really helpful. So we're going to do a little poll here. And the first question, we've got two questions that I think it's helpful to answer. The first is, where are you? And the second question is, how do you feel about how you've done so far? And so if you'll just take a minute and let's see if we can get some answers in. And this is also helpful to me to get a feel for the group, how many are just starting out and how many seasoned career journeyers we have. Okay, so it looks like we've got everybody who's going to answer has answered. So I'm going to end the poll here. Oh, good. And why don't we share the results? So this is also helpful because in my experience, knowing that you're not alone goes a long way. If you are feeling confused, if you're struggling, if you're not sure, where to take yourself and how to get there, you are not alone. So I can see that in this group, most folks are in mid-career or experienced in their careers and maybe finding new opportunities. So that's helpful. If we could go on to the next question about how we're feeling, it'll be interesting to compare where we are with how we're feeling about how we're doing. So this next question, try to get a feel of how successful you think you've been so far. You don't feel like you found any success yet, that's okay. And some people might feel that way because they're just getting started. Others might feel like it because they've been swinging at pitches and not feeling like they've made solid contact with the ball yet. So it looks like most folks either have had felt that they've had some success, which is great to hear, but feel like they can do even better, and others who feel successful but haven't necessarily defined success in terms of finding meaning and fulfillment, which is also, I think, interesting to think about. You don't have to have great meaning and fulfillment to feel successful, but for some people, it's a requirement. For me, it's been a requirement. I have not felt successful, even though I feel like I've been an accomplished professional, but not necessarily one that has found personal success. And for those who have not found it yet, feel free to engage. Let's talk about it. If you're comfortable sharing some of your experience and your questions, I hope you'll be comfortable sharing some of that in this discussion. Okay, so thank you for opening up and sharing your feelings about things. So now that you know where you are, any time you're on a journey, it helps to know where you're starting from. Figuring out where you're going is sometimes a challenge. And when we're young and we're starting out in our careers, it's easy to think that this is how it's going to look. This is my plan. This is certainly how I felt when I graduated from college. And when I finished graduate school, I thought I have these great new skills. I can be a lawyer. I have an MBA. I've increased my business toolkit. This is going to be great. I'm going to head out and head toward retirement. It's going to be terrific. It's not really what happened. But if this has been your experience, I congratulate you. I'm not saying it's not possible. It wasn't possible for me. And for most people I know, this is more what career journeys look like. Retirement, maybe never. I don't know when it's going to happen. Up, down, sideways, and backwards. I graduated from the Eller MBA program, and one of my favorite classes, though it was one of the hardest classes for me, was statistics, business statistics. And I don't remember a lot of what I learned, specifically. I mean, I took away a lot and I use it every day, but I don't remember a lot of specifics. But I do remember one thing very specifically from statistics class, which is when you look at a chart, it's really important to know, especially if it's, the vertical axis is like some data value and the horizontal axis is time. It's important to know where you are in that time horizon along that horizontal axis, because you may look at a chart and say, oh, I'm going straight up, but what comes immediately next might be going straight down or backwards. And by the same token, you might look like you're headed down, but what's around the corner maybe a hockey stick handle shooting straight up to success. So don't be put off if this is what your career has looked like, or if you're in that the first part of this graph. This is what mine looked like, and I feel like right now I've had the most successful career ever. But when I was in the middle of some of these stages, I couldn't have known where it was going to take me. But I had faith that if I stuck to my principles, and we're going to talk about this, if I stuck to my principles, I was going to get where I needed to be. And it may sound a little hokey, but I've always really believed, because my experience has shown me, that the universe knows what it's doing. And I've applied for jobs that I thought I was perfect for, that were going to be the next step in the great career. And then I didn't get them. And I thought, how could I not get it? It's terrible disappointment, only to find that the next thing that happened was the best thing that could have happened. And I couldn't have imagined it. My job at the bankruptcy court was like that. And in fact, when I had applied for a different job before taking that one, and I was so disappointed I didn't get it, I didn't know that at the same time, somebody else had applied for that job at the bankruptcy court. They'd made an offer, and then it didn't work out. And so it's almost like that had to happen. You know, the universe was trying to slow me down, so that I wouldn't miss the opportunity that was coming. I know that sounds a little weird, but it feels like the way things have worked. The other thing about this, and I look at this chart and I think this looks more like the Mediterranean cruise I took a few years ago than a sane person's career path. But everything I learned along the way led me to what came later. And one of the things I do, as Lacey mentioned, I volunteer for Partners in Education, and I go to career day programs at the middle schools in Santa Barbara. And I love it because, first thing I do is I ask people, I'm dressed and I may be in a suit or I'm wearing a jacket. And I ask the kids, what do you think I do for a living? And, they'll say, oh, you look like a lawyer, or you look like you're in banking or whatever. And I've done so many things that they're almost all right. And so it's a lot of fun. And it's wonderful to be able to talk to the kids about all the things that are possible. And you don't have to just do one thing. You can if you want to. So I gave Eller a plug. I've got to give the James E. Rogers College of Law a plug as well. It wouldn't be right. Something that I learned in law school that has carried me through, and I think is a useful business tool. By the way, that lesson about looking at the charts is also helpful if you buy and sell stock. So just keep that in mind. But law school taught me how important it is to define your terms. And I always thought it was crazy. You look at a statute and there's a section that could be pages and pages long, giving you definitions of what things mean when you think you know what things mean. But this is a good business principle too, because when you get to define what the terms are, you have a much better chance of succeeding. So, what is success? There was a point, one of the principles that I have followed throughout my career is that if I'm not happy, if I'm not having fun, if I'm not finding fulfillment, I should move on. I shouldn't settle for that. And my dad taught me that. And one day, I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer, I had never told him how much I appreciated having learned that from him. It's not like he told me that, but I watched his career and the changes that he made in his career and how it moved him forward. And even during the hardest times, he just sort of kept plugging away. And I said, Dad, I really appreciate how you taught me not to be afraid to change directions, not to be afraid to change jobs, not to settle, not to stop if you're not happy with what you're doing. I really appreciate that. And I think it's really helped me in my career. And he looked at me with this quizzical look on his face and he said, I taught you that? He had no idea, because even though that was the lesson and the journey that he took, he didn't like it. He hated all the change in his career. It was, the instability really bothered him and the insecurity that came with it. And here I was thinking that, well, my dad could do it. What do I have to be insecure about? I didn't know any better. I didn't know enough to be scared and to know, how risky it was. I just thought it had to work because I saw that it seemed to work for him. And I've tried to follow that. And so, my definition of success, I don't know if it'll be yours, but my definition of success is loving what I do, or at least liking it a lot, as much as possible, making a decent living. And we'll talk a little bit about, money, but, if I love what I do and I'm making a decent living and I'm not a burden on my children now or in my retirement, then I think that's successful. That's really all I need. And so you get to decide what is success, and nobody gets to tell you you're wrong. But the elephant in the room is money, which isn't inherently good or bad. I think of it as a byproduct. And I have found so far so good that by following these principles, following my heart, the money has followed. I'm not going to be ridiculously wealthy. But again, we're comfortable. Retirement is going to be okay. A lot of the decisions I made, I could make because of my wife and her career. And, we're in this together. And so together, We've been able to make it work. And so you got to look at your own situation and figure out what's right for you. And there will always be some trade-offs. But I just want to be clear that, I'm going to be talking a lot about values and following your heart, and that isn't necessarily, to supersede making a decent living. I'm not advocating that unless you want to live in poverty. I'm not suggesting you should live in poverty in order, to be happy in your job and to do something that's meaningful to you. It's about finding the right balance. And so, your definition is going to be based on what's important to you. And what I would suggest as you think about what's important to you, you may think but you may also surprise yourself. And so there's an exercise that I like to do from time to time. And it's again, sounds a little crazy maybe, but it works. Give yourself, set a timer and set your timer for like 30 seconds or a minute, however much time you think you need. And very quickly with your dominant hand, write a list of the things that are most important to you. Write down what your values are. And, all kinds of stuff's going to come out, money, music, wife, husband, family, kids, dogs, parents, whatever, helping people, whatever it is, you're just going to write down this list. And then when you're done, do it again, but do it with your non-dominant hand. And without getting into the psychology, because I'm not really qualified to talk about the psychology, but I learned this from a psychologist who said, the different, your brain works differently, as it activates different hands. And when you use your non-dominant hand, that opens up, and you may find that either the substance of your list is a little bit different or the order is different. And then circle the top 3 things. And those will probably be the things that are most important to you. And you can now look at your career choices and hold it up against this list and see, if I'm not feeling satisfied, maybe there's the answer. And if I am feeling satisfied, maybe there's the answer. Or it may give you some insight if it doesn't align, but yet you're still feeling pretty good about what's going on. So, how do we start our careers? Most of us launch our careers a lot earlier than we realize. I remember as a kid, being asked this question: what do you want to be when you grow up? And I find myself asking that question to children. And I remember in 5th grade, we had a little writing exercise, write about what you want to be when you grow up. And I wrote down that I wanted to either be a lawyer, an astronaut, or a radio announcer. And I'm pleased to tell you that I have so far achieved 2 out of 3. And I think that's not bad. But who knew? At that time, they ask us to start a career, to get on a path, whether it's education or whether it's just thinking about what you want to be when you grow up. With it, you don't even know what your options are. I didn't know. The reason I picked those 3 things was because my dad was a lawyer. I didn't know that he really wasn't crazy about being a lawyer, but he was a lawyer. An astronaut had come to my school in 3rd grade, and I thought that was pretty cool. So it could be pretty fun to be an astronaut. And this was in the 60s. So, moon landing and all. It was great idea to, explore space. But that was before I knew that most of the astronauts, at least at that point, I don't know if it's still true, were Air Force pilots, and I didn't want to go into the Air Force. So I wasn't going to be an astronaut, and I wanted to be a radio announcer because we had a close family friend who did radio, and I just thought he was one of the coolest people I'd ever met, and I just loved the idea of announcing groups. And my sister and I used to pretend play radio station when we were little, and she'd play her guitar and I'd be the DJ and announce the next song, and we had a good time. And then I got into high school, and my love of music kicked in. I wanted to be a music teacher. And I thought, I don't want to be a lawyer. That's the last thing I want to do, because it looked really hard and law school was terrifying. So I said, that's not going to happen. And astronaut was out. So that really only left me with music teacher. I got into college, majored in music, and thought this isn't right for me, because as a music major, I don't really have time to study other things. And no offense to any music majors out there, but the other music majors were kind of boring, because they only wanted music. That's all they did in their lives, which is why they were so good at what they did. And which is why I was okay, but I was not a great trumpet player. But what that meant was, what's in your heart, Dean? What do you need to feel more fulfilled? And it was, I needed more diversity in what I did. I needed to be engaged with people who had other interests that I could learn from. And, so I went back to one of my other loves, which was English. And I didn't know what I was going to do to make a living, but I knew that I would enjoy school. That was my first values-based decision-making process, right? That was the beginning of this long journey of making these choices that were going to affect my career based on what was really in my heart and how I was feeling about it, and not about what looked right on paper. So, you got to know what your options are. It's impossible to know what your options are, but you know something. So start with what you know, try things, experiment based on what's important to you. And this is critical. In my experience, the number one cause of dissatisfaction, and I did a presentation for the State Bar of Arizona annual bar conference one year on helping lawyers find more fulfillment, balance in their lives. And I knew from practicing law and from lawyers I knew that the greatest source of stress and anxiety and dissatisfaction was feeling that what they were doing, their actions were not aligned with their values, the things that were important to them, or they were having to do things that mattered, but in a way that conflicted with their values. And I knew that was true for me. And so the number one cause of satisfaction and fulfillment is getting these things in alignment. It applies to your workplace, your coworkers, it applies to the nature of the work, the tasks you're performing. All of it needs to be aligned with what's important to you. And I think it's true in your personal life. If you've experienced this where either your spouse or someone close to you says something or does something that seems to support something that matters to you, like let's say you want to volunteer, but time is tight and you've got kids and maybe a spouse and heavy workload, and you want to carve out time to go volunteer to help maybe at a shelter for people who have been displaced, and or help in a vaccination clinic. And if the person you're talking to says, how can you possibly take time away from the family or whatever it is, you feel bad, and you feel toward that person that it affects your relationship, that this person isn't supporting the things that are important to me. But if the response is, that's fantastic, let's see how we can make this work, then you have a closer, tighter bond and more affection. And that's true in the workplace as well. If your work environment, if the people you work for, if your employer, if you're the employer, if you're the boss, if you allow yourself to do things in a way that's consistent with what you believe is right and good, and furthers those values, you're going to feel a lot happier. You're going to have less stress, less anxiety. And I think that's one of the reasons I feel so satisfied and successful and fulfilled here at Direct Relief. The work itself is meaningful and it speaks for itself, but my environment is supportive of working in a way, the incentive structure supports working in a way that I think is honest and that earns trust and is respectful toward others. And I feel trusted and respected as well. And you can't ask for more than that. And on top of that, I get to make a decent living, and I don't think I'm going to be a burden on my kids. So it's all kind of coming together. And I saw that in the hiring process. In that story I told you, it was clear to me in that process that this would be the kind of place that would be true. So you can't always find the dream job. I'm in a dream job, and it may not always be. It may change. I may change, but right now I love it. But I'm reminded, and my apologies to Crosby, Stills, and Nash, who said, if you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. And I think if you can't be in the job you love, you can find a way to love the job you're in. And if you take away only one thing from our discussion today, I think this is the thing to take with you. Not only because it's a really good song, but because I think it's really true. And I think I have been in situations where my job was not, was not perfect. I can think of early in my career when I didn't really understand how to do this. I had a job at an advertising agency, and I wanted to work in advertising, but the job was not, it was a little bit menial. It was kind of low level. It was just me and the owner, so he never really gave me the good stuff to do. But I did meaningful work, and I did enjoy a lot of it. But the things about it that were not really fulfilling, I didn't know how to bring more to it. And to be fair, I was young, I was just starting out. Maybe I didn't have that much to bring, but I couldn't even bring a good attitude, So if I was getting bored, my mind would drift rather than finding ways to learn and really, leverage what I had. Whereas, later in my career, I went to work for Bombardier Aerospace after finishing in graduate school. And this, they didn't know they wanted me. It was another interesting story. If I have a chance, I'll elaborate a little bit on it. But the point I'll make right now is that it was really not, mind expanding work. It was contract administration. It was making sure that the airplane was being built on time and to specifications. And if it wasn't, which is often the case, It was smoothing things over and figuring stuff out, which inherently isn't all that exciting. But I had opportunities to mentor new hires who were younger and less experienced than I was. I had opportunities to network within the organization. I thought we could do our job better in my department if we had a really good channel of communication throughout the organization. And so I suggested that I take time. I suggested to my boss, let me be a fly on the wall in other departments. Let me, sort of be a scout and learn what's going on and maybe get advance notice of things that are happening. And I learned so much that way. And I got to engage with a variety of people. And that's what brought fun and excitement, into a job that could have otherwise been very mundane. So think about it. I'm reminded of a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, who is a Buddhist monk. He had a book called Peace is Every Step. And something that I remember from that book, and I wrote it down because I wanted to share it with you. He says, the present moment is filled with joy and happiness. If you are attentive, you will see it. And I think that applies to our work. We can feel like we're in a crummy job. It's not really working. But sometimes we just have to pause and think, what's here that maybe I'm not seeing? How can I find joy? How can I find pleasure in what I'm doing? Maybe it's not the task. Maybe the task itself is tedious, but maybe how I think about it, what I bring of myself to the task. And I think of it as, what do you bring to the table? So when I did get my job at Bombardier, I had graduated from law school, business school, and a friend of my wife's knew somebody who was at Bombardier and had learned that they were opening a new department and they were hiring and would need a contract administrator. So I thought, perfect. So I applied, and the manager, who was also new to this site, after talking to me for a while, he said, we've never hired a lawyer for this position. I don't know if it could work. And I thought, that's crazy. It's a contract administrator position, and you've never hired a lawyer and you're not sure it could work. And so we talked about what his concerns were. You don't know anything about aerospace or the aviation business. It's your experience is all different. And I looked him in the eye and I said, I guarantee you what I do know about myself. I don't have any aerospace experience, it's true. I know something about contracts, and I know a lot about process, and I know a lot about people. And I can guarantee you that in 6 months or less, I will know everything I need to know about the aerospace business to be successful in this job. And he said, okay. And I thought, great. So, what did I bring to it? I brought all of my other experience, figuring how different could aerospace be. And it turns out in the ways that were meaningful to my work, it wasn't very different at all in very meaningful ways. And so, I think that that really exemplifies what it means to know what you're bringing to the party. I think of it like a potluck dinner. Do you bring something that you really love and that you think is good and you're going to enjoy sharing, and you'll use it and your own good spirits and sense of humor to make it a great evening for everybody? Or did you swing by the Safeway deli case on your way to the party to pick up a quart of potato salad? Now, I do like potato salad, but if that's kind of your attitude, if that's what you're bringing to your work and you're feeling dissatisfied, that could have something to do with it. So think about what you're bringing. What do you have that you haven't shared, that's a part of you and that is meaningful to you, that you haven't yet been able to manifest in your work? And maybe, nobody knew that you had it. Maybe you didn't think to offer it because it just didn't seem to fit. But I would encourage you to dig deep, put it out there, talk to the decision makers if you're not the decision maker. And if you are the decision maker, within the bounds of your work environment, push the limits a little bit. And a lot of the stuff we're thinking of, that I'm thinking about and that may occur to you, isn't crazy. It just may not be what is thought of as typical in your industry or in your particular work culture. And so again, this is about aligning what you do and how you do it with your values and what's important to you. So think about your skills, your attitude, look for those opportunities, keep it in your pocket, ready to go, so that when the opportunity opens, or if you can nudge opportunity along, you're ready to offer. And then, like that potluck dinner party, sometimes it just doesn't work out. Sometimes it's, hard as you try, you're just not a good fit. And sometimes the organization makes a mistake in hiring you. Sometimes you make a mistake in pushing for a job and convincing your employer that you were perfect, but maybe you really weren't. And maybe you thought you could make it work, and you don't always get it right. And that's okay. In the tech world, Silicon Valley, they love to say, oh, I just enjoy failing time after time because that's how you get success. And there's a lot of truth to that, defining failure as, not being perfect. I think there's a lot of truth to that. So, but know when it's time to cut your losses. Again, I think of a potluck where, if I brought the quinoa and kale salad, and it turns out that everybody else at the party is a bunch of, meat eaters, and, everyone's talking about sports, and I'm not really into sports. I don't really know what they're talking about. And you can only fake it for so long. At a certain point, you got to say, it's been fun. I've learned something, but I think it's time to go home, time to move on. And in your work, that's true as well. And how much time that is a personal choice. The things that are there, the good paycheck, the benefits, if you're at the potluck and they've got the big lasagna, it'll carry you for a little while, but it's not going to leave you feeling like you have meaningful work unless that is, the big lasagna is your goal. If the big paycheck and the benefits is your definition of success, that's okay. But there may be other things about it that aren't working for you that tell you it's not a good fit. So this applies whether you're the employee or the boss. What trade-offs are you willing to make? That's when you go back to that list. Maybe you need to do that list again. Do it with your right hand, do it with your left hand, and see if things are still aligning well for you. Which again means being open to possibilities. The best opportunities in my career have been the ones I didn't know I was looking for. Many of them I discovered during challenging times, and we're in challenging times right now in a lot of industries. Plenty of good work for people who can work remotely and have knowledge-based jobs. But your industry might be struggling, or something about the past year might have put you in a position where things that were working for you in 2019 aren't working for you anymore. And so how do you look for opportunities during challenging times? I think the answer is do the same thing you would do when times are good. Only do more of it, and maybe be more open to things that you didn't think were a good fit. Again, just because you've never worked in that industry or done that job title doesn't mean you aren't perfectly qualified to do it. Figure out what your skills are. Write down what you've done at a very functional level, because ultimately it's the function of what you do more than what you call it or the reason why you do it that's going to figure out whether you've got the technical skills to do the job. And this is, again, it's another lesson that's really been reinforced since I've been working at Direct Relief, where the work we do, the cause, we almost take for granted. We know it's meaningful, helping people who don't have access to quality healthcare get access. But looking at it from a functional standpoint, what we do is we operate a warehouse and we mobilize resources, philanthropic resources. And when you look at the functionality of what you do in the context of the greater purpose, you start to see new possibilities and new options, ways to expand what you do, and you understand what your strengths and weaknesses are. So network. Instead of asking people what jobs you know of, just learn about what they do and how they do it and how they got where they are. Figure out who they might know. Leverage LinkedIn for all it's worth. If anybody's out there and you want to, find my LinkedIn page, I welcome you to message me. Let's connect, and you're welcome to sift through my connections and see if there's anything there that might be of interest. And if I actually know the person, I try to know most of my LinkedIn connections, at least slightly. I'm happy to make an introduction if I think it'll be a good fit. I went from hair restoration to law school to business school to Bombardier to bankruptcy court to financial advisor to Direct Relief. No obvious logic to any of that. But if I look back and I see, what was it about each of those things that made them meaningful, I find the common thread. It was all about finding ways that I can help other people, finding ways I could be a generalist and connect the dots and use it to help other people do better. And so if you're not feeling good about where you are, ask why. Why are you feeling good about where you are, right? The question applies both directions to help you replicate your success, but also to figure out why you may not be feeling success now, why you're stuck. Why do you think you're stuck is a really good place to start. And then you can start exploring how to make the course corrections based on balancing out the things that really matter to you and the trade-offs you're willing to make or need to make, because circumstances might require that you make trade-offs today that you wouldn't have made a year ago, or that you might not be prepared to make 5 years from now. So, if I find myself daydreaming about being in a different job, if I'm grinding my teeth because there's a task I have to do, or I think my job's going in a direction I don't like, I'm going to ask myself, wait a minute, why am I feeling this way? Why am I daydreaming about another job? And it may just be a temporary thing. It's like my sister told me, before, my daughter was born, my sister said, I got some parenting advice for you. Whatever it is, it's a phase and it'll pass. And I thought that was great advice. And I think that that's true as a parent, it's true as a husband, it's true in my job. It's amazing how much of it will pass if you don't get too worked up about it, and don't jump the gun. Take a breath, ask the question why. Why am I thinking of something different? Why do I think I want to try something different? And and you can do more than you think you can do. That's the other thing. To see the possibilities requires that you recognize you can do things you've never done before, using all the things you have done before and repackaging them, bundling them, offering them for sale in a context in a new market that maybe you didn't think of as a market before now. So I'm going to leave you with Steve Jobs. The only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, don't settle. I think that's true in finding success in your career as well. It's the advice my dad didn't know he gave me. It has served me well for all of these years. And I'm going to end with that and see if we can answer some questions and advance this conversation a little further.
Well, thank you so much, Dean. We appreciate your story and advice. And I think there was a really true message about authenticity, and we can see the authenticness that you've kept of being true to yourself. And that's, I think, a great message to take away. One of the questions that we had, I'll just start off with during our registration, was what advice do you have someone who is lost mid-career, pivoting without success and keep stumbling?
Yeah, that is such a common question. And when people do reach out to me, whether it's because they find me on LinkedIn or they've known me just because of the community that we live in, and we've met each other, and they know what I do and where I've come from, and it can look like I had that straight line career if they don't really look deep. And that feeling, it can be very frustrating. And I answer the question really by starting with a couple of questions, which is, where are you now in your career? Because that may help inform the answer. If you're early in your career and you're feeling kind of stuck or lost, it may be that you just haven't had enough time to try stuff, or you don't know what you're looking for. You just haven't discovered enough opportunity. So I would begin by, where am I? And that why question. Why are you feeling like you've been pivoting without success? How have you defined success? Have you defined it in a way that's really meaningful to you? If that's the case, then the answer is pretty clear why you haven't found it yet, because you've defined it in a way that's not really working for you. And those pivots, they might just be swinging at the ball. It may just be you haven't pivoted enough times for it to really hit. So, stumbling around is one of the best ways to eventually find what you're looking for. Think about how you've gotten the jobs that you've had and the one you're in now. Think about what you bring to the table. Are you clear about your priorities and the trade-offs you're willing to make? Write it down like we talked about. Do a personal inventory of what you've liked and disliked, even if you're not happy in your job. Are there things that you like? Are there pieces of it that you'd take with you? And then, sift through LinkedIn and see what kind of jobs other people have. And one of the risks of LinkedIn is they like to look for commonality. So I'm always getting suggestions, connect with these people. They have the same job title you do. And I feel like, no, I don't want to talk to people who have the same job title I do. I want to talk to all those other people whose job titles are totally different. And connect with everybody, talk to everybody, go to every webinar that looks at all interesting, even if you don't think it's, relevant to your career. I got involved going to these webinars. It's slightly related to my work, but just real quick, I met a woman at a Belgian consul's residence in Los Angeles. And how we got there is kind of a long story. I won't go into it now, but sometime over coffee, I'd be happy to share it. So I'm at a dinner at the Belgian consulate's residence. It was a breakfast. And I met a woman there who turns out to be like the alumni association director for a Belgian university, but she's, lives near Stanford. And so in addition to that, she also is very involved with entrepreneurial efforts and humanitarian work all over the world. And she invited me to this webinar about a sort of a humanitarian business startup in India, where they're developing this technology to help community health workers reduce the rate of breast cancer in rural communities. And I'm thinking, that sounds interesting. So I'll go and I attend, and I've been going to all of their webinars. And at the most recent one, there was a woman who was also kind of on the advisory board for this company. She's a French woman living in Tokyo who is a cultural anthropologist doing graduate research there, studying the Japanese culture and how it applies to Western marketing. And I'm thinking, this is fantastic. It is the most interesting thing I've heard. And I would never have found her. But I've learned just from talking to her, remotely and following what she posts on Facebook, I have learned about marketing principles that I didn't learn in business school, sorry, Eller, and things that I actually can use in my work, and that give me insights that I can take with me the next time I'm looking for something. So think way outside the box.
Great. So we had another question come in, kind of building off that pivot question. This person's already in the boat and pivoting and swimming upstream. And so already participating in the advice that you've given as far as informational interviews, networking, stretching boundaries, et cetera, but just not getting that conversion into an interview. So is there a way to convey the values from their previous jobs? So like you mentioned, the zigzag and not the straight line,
Right.
on their resume and cover letter so that they get that foot in the door.
Yeah. And I see that this comment in response, personalizing resumes can be daunting. I gave my older daughter some advice not too long ago. Last year, she's looking for a change, and she has a hard time saying, I can do this thing that I've never done before, or you don't think you're looking for someone like me, but I'm going to help you understand why you really are. And some of that comes from just taking a lot of deep breaths, looking yourself in the mirror and saying, you know what, there's a lot more to you than we see. And remind yourself of that every day and take the deep breath and just do it. But then there's a practical aspect of it, which is really try to get to know the organization. I've seen a lot of resumes that come through here, people looking for work in our department. During the pandemic, Direct Relief was one of the few organizations I knew of that was hiring. We got a lot of applications. And I saw some of the cover letters, and they really didn't make a point of showing us that they understood the culture, what our values are as an organization and how we do what we're doing, so that they could make the leap. And so I think that's an important step, and it's difficult to explain how to do it in just a couple of minutes we have here, but I am open. If anybody wants to email me or message me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to have this conversation with you about ways you can do that. And so it's looking at what you've done, figuring out what they're really saying. What are they really saying when they put these standard job requirements in there? Or when it says, in lieu of this education, this kind of experience. Well, what is it about the experience that would make it okay? What are they really getting at? And then don't go through the front door. That's one of the hardest things you can do, especially in a tough job market like we're in right now. Find a side entrance, find a window you can climb in through. When I got this job, I saw something that interested me. I didn't know what it was. They created a position for me, and it was all because I thought, who do I know? And I didn't go to my fellow board member to say, I want this job at Direct Relief. How can I get it? Can you get this is what I hear all the time. People want to meet me to get the job because they think that I'll put in a good word. I'll make sure the resume gets looked at. And what I tell them is, look, just apply through the website. You know, we have a process. The best thing you can do. They're going to look at it, I promise. But I don't interfere with their decision making. If it gets through the screening and then it comes to me, and you and I have talked, and I like you, I'm happy to tell everybody how much I like you. But you know, that's not always the best way. You know, I said to Dawn, you know, tell me about the organization. I don't know if I want to work there yet. It looks interesting, but let's have a conversation. And in that conversation, I had the opportunities to drop some hints. And this is a lot of what I learned about sales working for Direct Relief, how to integrate the things you want people to take away into the conversation in a way that's natural and authentic, but it just makes sure you get to make your point. And so that's a strategic process that requires that you know what message you want to leave this person, your audience, with. You need to know that ahead of time. This is good PR, right? When you get interviewed, they're going to ask you the questions that are hard to answer and that they want to ask, the gotchas, and your job is to answer the question, telling them what you want them to know. You know, politicians do it all the time, and the really good ones do it in a way that leave you feeling like you've really learned something and they answered your question. And the bad ones are the ones who don't answer the question at all and just tell you, you know, they give you their stump speech. So you don't want to do that, but you just want to listen for the opportunities to say what you need to say, what you know they need to know about you. And what they're going to take away is the way you engaged with them. What questions did you ask? How comfortable were you? Did you make appropriate jokes? How did you present yourself? And those go a long way as well.
I think that's really great advice, Dean. Thank you so much. As we're approaching the 1 o'clock hour, I just want to say how proud we are to have you as an alum of our Eller MBA program, and that I think it's a great time to be utilized in furthering your education when you're making a pivot as well, and hearing wonderful things that you were able to still utilize some of the things that you've learned in the program and your JD as well. One of the questions was that you were JD after MBA, but you in fact were in the dual degree program, which is awesome. So we appreciate.
If I could just really quick let everybody know. So again, this is another weird pivot. I went in for the JD program. I didn't want to be a lawyer, but I did decide going to law school would be a good idea. But it would buy me 3 years before I had to figure out what I wanted to do. And everybody said, you do whatever you want, get a law degree. You can do whatever you want in the world. And I found out in the first semester that that was not going to be true. I needed business skills. And I talked to my contracts professor to say, I love this, but I need more. He said, go across the street, get into the MBA program, do both. It'll only add 1 more year. And it was the best thing I ever did.
Well, that's great to hear. And that's, I think, the plug for our program. And again, we're happy to have you as an alum. And thank you for taking your time today to spend with us and share your wisdom.
Right. Thank you, Dean, and thank you everyone for joining. I do have to give a shout out to Rob McLaughlin, our Director of Alumni Engagement in Maricopa County. She was running backstage for us. We will email out the recording of this, and it will also be logged on our website, ArizonaAlumni.com/careers. And you can check us out for more events and connect with us on the Bear Down Network. So Dean, thank you again very much, and bear down and go Cats, everyone.
Thank you. Say hi if you're in Santa Barbara.